Hello. Hello, Disobey. My name is Antti Virtanen, and I'm going to talk about how to get into buildings and places where you shouldn't be without using social engineering. And we are talking about bypassing access control here. We are not talking about bypassing the alarm systems, for example. I'm not going to introduce you any traditional lockpicking techniques. And I want to be clear that social engineering is by far the best approach if you are doing a red teaming gig or something. Social engineering works much better than these tricks, but it's not the only way to get in. And preferably, we wouldn't want to leave any kind of traces. We wouldn't want to harm the lock or the door or anything like that. And in the end, I'm going to talk a bit about risk management and mitigations that you can do to prevent some of these attacks. And my story starts with this door. About 30 years ago, I was playing with my friends in front of this building, and we realized that it's possible to get in without a key by using this ice cream here. Because when you eat that ice cream, you are left with the wooden stick, and you could stick that in between the door and the frame, and then just wiggle it. And the latch goes inside the door, and the door opens. And we were like, oh yeah, we are the kings. Our parents weren't convinced that this is a good hobby for the kids, but they had to install a mitigation to this door. They had to install a metal frame there to prevent this attack. And now I checked this later. For some reason, they have taken the metal out of the door. So that's interesting. And we were so happy with our success here that then we went to have other kind of adventures. For example, we noticed that in the building where I lived in, you could get inside any apartment because children have small hands, so you could like put your hand from the mailbox, reach over inside the door and open the door from the door knob. And the residents in that building were also not so happy about this finding. And then we went to have some other adventures. I'm going to talk about them later. But now I'm the security chief at Solita, so now I'm looking at this also from the professional perspective. So I'm responsible for the physical security of our offices. And I had to stop this hobby because somewhere when I was about 15 years old, I realized that if I'm going to continue this, I will get into trouble with the law and the police. And then I haven't had this hobby for 20 years, and now I have a professional perspective. I'm also a hacker at Team Rot, and I'm not doing red teaming gigs for a living. So I'm a hobbyist in that sense. And I still suck at social engineering. One legal disclaimer before we continue. I don't want you to get into any kind of trouble, because if you like see a building and you try out the doors and you pen test in a white hat manner, but if you go inside, you are effectively trespassing on someone's property. And pretty much in every country, it's a criminal offense, and police will ask you some questions pretty quickly. So don't do that. Get the permission if you want to do something like that. But now let's switch to the attack mode. And before we can do anything, I recommend that we prepare ourselves, like do a full recon of the building. And when I say full, I mean full, like go through every door, every latch, every window, every back door. Some of them might be open. And when I was a kid, we also climbed to the roof of the buildings, which is pretty dangerous. We could have been killed. So I suppose the red teaming people don't do that. Find out the model and the type of the access control system. Check out what kind of locks do they have. And who has access to different parts of the building, and so on. This is active recon, but if you are just walking around the building and looking at things, it's unlikely that you will get into any kind of trouble doing this part. Now for the next phase, when we have done this recon, what have we found out? Well, this is the oldest trick in the book, and it still works. There are open doors, like in this picture. It's from a Prisma shopping center, and I don't know where that door leads to. Probably nothing interesting there. But when you start paying attention, you will see a lot of open doors, which might look like they are closed. And this works marvelously well. Last autumn, I accidentally did this. I was supposed to go into our office here in Helsinki. And in the same floor, there's another company. I accidentally walked into their office. People were coming out, and they didn't ask me anything. I walked in, and then I realized that, oh shit, this is not our office at all. This is the wrong company. I didn't have any kind of badge with me or anything. Obviously, I wasn't nervous because I honestly thought that I'm going to our office. And I was dressed up properly. I didn't look like this. I had a shirt and a jacket because I was going to meet a customer. And it just happens to be the proper dress code for that company. So I looked exactly like their own employees. Then I couldn't resist. I stayed there a bit just to see if somebody asked me, who are you? What are you doing in our office? But nobody asked me anything. So then I walked out. So this still works, and you don't have to talk to anybody or convince anybody to open you the door. You can just walk in. And if you have props, like if you have a fake ID badge, then you cannot say that this is an accident. I'm here by accident. So these fake props like ladders and maintenance guy outfits might help you, but then clearly you are not there by accident. Here's another very old trick. You can bypass the door because you can climb those stairs and then flip behind the door easily. You don't have to be an athlete to do this in this case. And depending on what they are protecting, this might be enough protection for them, because you cannot bring big stuff out if you cannot open the door. And sometimes it's not that easy. There was one door when I was a kid, which we really wanted to get behind this door, and it was a tall door, but there was space at the top between the roof and the door. So one person couldn't do it, but two persons could. My friend helped me so that I could get my hands to the top of the door, and then I pulled myself up and climbed down and opened the door to my friend. And we did this multiple times because it was an interesting place to be in. And they had thought that because the door is so high, nobody can go there without a ladder, but that's not strictly true. You could also bypass the lock. Like in this picture, that's my finger. So the constructor had installed this door so that you could put a finger between the door frame and the glass wall. And if you can do that, you can use something like that metal wire there and reach the door handle, and then just pull down from the handle, and the door opens, because that's what the door handle does from the inside. And in this picture, there are other similar tools. That metal wire in the picture is actually a spare key I made. It works marvelously well on Mazda 121, because I kind of needed a spare key for that. And this works in many places because the doors are not airtight. There's usually some way to wiggle something in, and depending on the door, you might be able to pull the handle upwards also, depending on the door. Then there's this. I'm saying that it's a privilege escalation because you have a reason to be in some place, a legitimate reason. But then you play with the lock. For example, you put something in the hole where the latch goes, so that it doesn't engage fully when the door is closed. And you only need something like 5 seconds to do this. And it's easy to do even when you are supervised by someone. And then the door looks closed. It might even click and make all the sounds. And then you can come back later, unsupervised. That's the idea. And this notice is from a certain building. So apparently some people are still doing this today. And very surprising that a series of robberies has started after someone has made this unlock trick to the door. Here's a boiler room. And you cannot get inside that boiler room from the main door of the boiler room. But this is the side door to the boiler room, from another room next to the boiler room. And for some reason, this is unlocked. And this boiler room is not interesting, but it was a similar boiler room which led me to a hospital in Finland. And we first tried to access the maintenance tunnels below the hospital from the main entrance. And we were always stopped. Somebody always asked us, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here, go away." And we were like, "Okay, sorry. We took a wrong turn somewhere. We weren't meant to come here. We wanted to go to the visitor area or something." And we couldn't get in. So what we did, we examined every building close to the hospital, because we had the reason to believe that there are underground tunnels leading from the other buildings to the hospital. And then we found a way to get in a boiler room. And from the boiler room, there was a small latch on the wall. And you could climb in, and there was a dark, small tunnel. And when you crawled the tunnel, you ended up in a bigger tunnel. And suddenly, you were inside the hospital maintenance tunnels and quite far away from the main entrance, which was convenient because there wasn't so many people going on those tunnels in that point. So all we had to do was to avoid meeting anyone in the tunnels. And we were never caught. We were there multiple times. And it was very exciting, I must say. And we found interesting things in these tunnels, but I'm not going to talk about that here today. What I'm saying is that if you do the full recon, you might find a very strange way to get inside the building. That was the physical part. Now let's talk about digital access control a bit. I have 3 different approaches to this digital access control. First, technology, then we talk about the process, and then I will show you some installation mistakes that can happen. And how many of you know how digital access control works with these tags? Probably at least some of you know. It works roughly like this. It doesn't always work exactly like this, but this is the rough idea. The reader asks the tag, who are you? And the tag has an identity, 1234, and it says that I'm 1234, and the reader asks the server, can I let this 1234 in? And if the server says that yes, you can, then the control system applies voltage to a relay, and the relay opens the lock and the door. That's the brief summary of how this works. And obviously, there's communication between these elements. There's communication between the reader and the tag, and communication between the reader and the server. And since it's 2020, of course, we could assume that the communication is encrypted and authenticated and signed so that you cannot tamper with it. You cannot sniff it. Of course, it's 2020. And if we are talking about new buildings, certainly this is the case. How many of you think that this is the case for new buildings? Some people. Yeah, actually, that was what I thought. That certainly these attacks have been around for a long time, so certainly they are not building new buildings which are vulnerable, but they are. Quite often the communication is not encrypted at all, and it's not authenticated in any way. So if you present the tag to your own reader, it will happily talk with it, and you can also sniff the traffic between the tag and the reader when they are having a conversation and so on. And this opens door to different things. And there's a reason behind this. If you want to know the history and the legacy, why this is so, you can Google Weekend and you find different things. But the history behind this is such that Weekend is a brilliant idea. It was a brilliant idea decades ago when it was invented. You have a passive element, and you can read bits from the passive element which doesn't have a battery, and it works. It's magic, and it's great. And the bad thing is that they are still using this as a model for these systems today. Now, the obvious question is, how difficult is it to copy an access tag? And this depends, but you need to get close to the tag. You cannot copy it from 2 meters away. That's not how it works. Because it's basically some kind of conversation, and since there's no battery, there's no power in the tag. It's a very small distance. But if you can do it, the nice thing is that these tags don't have any kind of memory inside usually. So they don't remember having a conversation between your copying machine. So it leaves no trace. You can make a copy and nobody ever finds out about it. And this particular tag here, there's no magic inside. Like, you can see it. There's some induction loop and antenna, and that's it. No magic. And then we have these wonderful tools. I have this CISO here, which is also on the slide. So this costs 50 euros, and anybody can use it. A 5-year-old kid can use it. You present the tag, press the button, and it copies the tag, and then you can use this to open the doors, because you can replay the tag with this. You can buy a cloner device for 15 euros, and anybody can use that. You can use your phone in some cases. You can find this software from the Google App Store and download this to your phone, and you can play with MIFAR classic tags, because they just happen to use the same frequency that your phone uses for NFC. So, magic. And if you are really, really brave, you can also send your tag by mail, and they will send you back copies of your tag. And they can support any copyable protocol and version. No hacker magic required for these, and practically no money. Then there are professional tools. The Proxmark size factor is like this, and it's about 300 euros or so. And it can work multiple frequencies, and it can reverse engineer the traffic and so on. It's a real hacker tool. It's not a duplicator. It would be quite expensive duplicator. But you still need to get close. So maybe in an elevator, you could get close to someone, like, psst, and copy the tag. But Finnish people don't really like that kind of proximity. So the next level is to use long-range antenna. Put it inside your backpack. Put it inside this bag, and then just go next to someone in a train, for example. Sit down. Oh, that's it. Now you have the tag. And it wasn't suspicious, even to Finnish people. And I don't know what this Rebats Enterprise does exactly, because they are not releasing the specifications. But if somebody here knows, I would be happy to understand what it does. 3,500 euros, and it claims to be some kind of autophone cloner for police enforcement. Okay, so access tag copying is possible, and it might be easy. The next question in your mind might be, is my office safe? And you can check this. If your tag looks like that, it's not safe. The tag helpfully says that it's Indala. So if you Google Indala tag cloning, you can find the videos and examples of how easy it is. And if the tag doesn't have any kind of label, you can take a picture of the tag or the reader and do Google reverse image search. I did it once because I asked the people who are responsible for the security that what kind of standard is your reader using, and they said that that's a business secret. It took me 5 minutes of Googling to find out. Pretty business secret. And you can, of course, check it with Proxmark if you want to know what kind of standard it's using. So that was trick number 6. Copy an access tag and use that copy access tag. And the biggest risk here is you don't know that it's possible. If you know that it's possible, you can make some kind of decisions about the mitigations or decide if this is a risk that you don't want to take. And I have a demo video here. Which I got from a friend. And in this case, the tag has been cloned with Proxmark. And when you clone it, you can clone it to different kind of tags, but the device came from the shop with that labeled card like this. There are variations to this. If you cannot get close to the person who has the access tag, you can also try to attack the reader and the communication between the reader and the server. If you can go to the building and tamper with the reader, you can insert something like this to the system. Because the communication between the reader and server might be unencrypted and using this old vegan protocol. So for about 30 euros, you can sniff the traffic And you can keep collecting different access tags as they go through the door. So do this to the front door, and you will get a lot of access tags in a short period of time. Of course, this requires some skills. You cannot you have to understand something and gain some kind of access first to the building. But it's not overly difficult. Then we have trick number 7, request to exit sensors. These are not very common in Finnish buildings. I have seen these in 2 kind of places, basically. But the idea is that somebody is going out, and the door opens automatically when it detects that a person is going out. And usually, these react to heat changes. So, for example, there are demo videos in the internet where people can blow smoke behind the door, blow smoke through the door somehow, and suddenly the sensor thinks that you are inside and the heat has changed and I will open this door. Or you can spray something, like cold air or something inside, and that triggers the exit sensor. And again, this works because the doors are not airtight. You can slip something through the door without damaging the door. Here's an example of exit sensor door in Finland. Now, let's talk about the process, how digital access control works from the process perspective. So it doesn't exactly work like the old hotels, but it's quite close to that, actually. How many of you work in a big office building with multiple organizations? Yeah. If you have only one organization, it might be different, but the bigger office buildings with multiple organizations, there's usually some kind of info desk in the lobby. And this info desk might not have the ability to program the keys. They might have, but might not have. Anyway, they hand out the keys to the employees and the different people. So they have pre-programmed keys waiting for delivery. And they usually have a master key, which they can use to open any door in the building. And how do they keep these keys? Well, pretty often there's no safe. There might be a locked drawer, which you can open very easily, or something like that. And what could possibly go wrong here? Of course, there are obvious social engineering angles here, but what other things could possibly go wrong? Well, you could steal from the lobby. There are different ways to do this, but if you walk to the lobby during the office hours, you cannot reach your hand behind the desk. It will look a bit strange if you do that. Or you can do that if you're very quick and handy, but you could take your backpack with the long-range antenna and just place it on the desk. It's not very suspicious if you are trying to find something from your backpack. And since the keys are often in close proximity, you might be able to copy the keys just like that without anyone noticing or without talking to anyone. And after office hours, where do they keep the master key and these other keys? Well, they might be in an easily accessible place depending on the building. And even if the keys are locked away too tightly, there's usually some kind of box for the visitor keys, because you don't want the visitor keys left to the info desk when nobody's there. So you have a box. And this box is usually just a simple mailbox or something like that. So you can easily open that after the office hours. So just slip into the building during the normal hours, and you don't have to go into anyone's office at that time. Just hang around a bit, and at 5 o'clock the info desk people will go home. And then just read a book for 2 hours and see what kind of visitor tags you have there. And at that point it's 7 o'clock, and they are still valid. You can still use them immediately to access the office. And there might be somebody working there, but maybe not more than one person, so the alarm system is off, and you can just walk around if you are a criminal or red teamer or something. Then there's the evil visitor case. Because these tags cost so much money, like €1 per tag or so, they don't usually physically destroy the tag. They will give it to the next person with updated access permissions after you return the tag. So you could copy the tag and return it, and then come back later. If they have given it to the next person with updated permissions, your copy now has access to other parts of the building. And when I showed this to one infodesk company, that hey, these access tags can be copied like this easily, and I was like, obviously they are going to destroy the tag, and which I gave them. I said that this has been copied, and the copy is not in my hand, so here's the tag, and give me a new one. And they were like, okay, I will put in this pile and give it to the next person. I was like, no, don't do that. You have to destroy it, because I cannot control what happens to the copy. But they had never heard about this, and this was last year. They had never heard that these tags can be copied. They had not prepared at all. And it was a rather big company and a rather big office building we are talking about in this case. And I was totally baffled, like, how is it possible that you haven't heard about this? Because this has been around for years. This is also a nice story. I was behind the door, and I really wanted to go to the other side, but I didn't have access permissions to go through the door. So I went through every possible path. I went upstairs, I went downstairs, and searched for every possible door. And eventually I found a way to walk through other doors to get behind that one door. And then I started thinking, like, how is this possible? How could this happen? Because the system could easily check that the access permissions are illogical and don't make any sense. But it happens because the software often deals with a list of tags and list of doors, and it doesn't have any kind of mapping to the topology. So you cannot run a graph algorithm which would tell you that these nodes are reachable from these nodes, and that kind of system doesn't make any sense. You have configured it wrong, please fix it. No, it's just a list of tags and list of doors. And in this case, the building was very complex, so the topology was very complex. If there's just one door to exit the area and one door to enter the area, this doesn't happen, but in a complex situation, this kind of things happens. Okay. Finally, even if we have a perfect system that uses encryption and we have perfected the process of handling the access tags and everything, you can still get the installation wrong. And this picture is a typical installation in office buildings. So there's a panel at the top, which you can lift with your finger. And then you can see the wirings and stuff there. And it shouldn't matter that you can lift this with the finger, but it actually opens some avenues. Now first I have a video of really weird attack, which I got from a friend also. What did just happen? Let's look at it again, because it's so unbelievable. So the door is locked, and somebody just manhandles the handle, and the door opens. Why did that even work? Why in the hell does it work like that? We discussed this, and we came to some kind of conclusion that this is a cheap lock, and it uses a solenoid system, and it's possible that it's a bit broken, but anyway, because it's a cheap system, it thinks that you are coming from the inside out, and just opens the door. And if you try this at your office, please be prepared that you might break something. I don't recommend trying this out on your own office. It might cost you some money, but this was really, really weird. This is another kind of installation mistake that can happen. I have seen this. They changed the reader in the door, and they had drilled holes to the door for the past installation. So what do? Do they change the door because it costs 800 euros to change the door? Of course not. So the holes were still there, and the wires were accessible through these holes, these older holes. And when I mentioned this, they were like, "It doesn't matter. Like, how could anybody like take the wires out of the hole and do something? It's probably still there, I think." Of course, this shouldn't happen if it's installed properly. The wires should be inside the door so that you cannot access them without drilling holes to the door. This is a variation of the previous one. If you cut the power to the electrical door system, it can fail open or it can fail closed. For security reasons, you have to get out of the building if the power is cut. So if there's a mechanical override, like a knob or something, then it can fail closed, and you can still get out. But if there's no mechanical override, usually it fails open, which means you can simply cut the power somehow, and all the doors open in the building. And this is the final trick from the installation issues, because this was also like, what the actual is happening here? This was a new building last year, and we lifted one of these panels with the finger. And the control box, which controls this everything, was at the wrong side of the door. So you could just use a screwdriver and short circuit something, and then the lock would open without any kind of access tag. And no amount of encryption will help if you do this kind of mistake. And then we got into thinking like, okay, so this is a new installation, one door. Is it a one-off mistake? Please check all the other doors in the building. You can probably guess it wasn't a one-off mistake. There were more than one of these mistakes. And if you think about how this happens, since it's not a one-off mistake, there's probably one guy in the installation crew who repeatedly does this mistake in other buildings too. I have no idea who installed this, but I'm pretty convinced that the same person has done this multiple times in multiple buildings in Finland. So that's also something you might check. That's for the tricks. Now let's talk a bit about mitigations. For example, if you have a PIN code, it doesn't matter so much that your access tag can be copied. That's an easy mitigation, because these mitigations, of course, cost money. You could use proper standards, and you could separate the alarm system from the access control system. If you are using an integrated alarm and access control system, all of these mistakes become deadlier. But if your alarm system is separate from the access control, even if somebody can get in, the alarm might go off and you might catch that person. But the biggest and the best mitigation is proper administrative process. Nobody should be able to get an access tag by social engineering and saying that I need this access tag and I have to do some maintenance work. So if you have a proper process, you are well off already. From the risk management perspective, you have to decide for yourself if any of these things matter to you. I cannot tell you that. What I can tell you is that you can pass multiple security audits, category audits, and all kinds of audits, and they check some of these things. But nobody has ever asked me anything about, like, is it possible to copy your access tags? Nobody has ever asked that question. Nobody has ever checked the control box installation. Is it in the wrong side of the door? They never do that. So you might have these vulnerabilities and still pass the security audits. Thank you.